Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the 18th of July, 2011. The podcast where the best defense is good sarcasm. This is your host, Shane Killian. First, a brief update. Last week, we talked about the Casey Anthony case and what it means for justice. I mentioned the possibility that the jurors believed she was innocent, but couldn't get there beyond reasonable doubt based on the evidence. 2 jurors have now spoken out on their verdict, and they confirm that speculation. They both say they didn't believe Casey Anthony's story, but, to quote juror number 3, it's just lack of hard evidence. She also said the other jurors would say the same thing. Now, these 2 women, and probably the other jurors too, are facing threats from an irate and irrational public that just doesn't seem to get the idea that vengeance is not the correct way of doing things. Juror number 12 has fled her home state of Florida in fear for her life. Her husband has also had a traumatic time after being separated from his wife for the 44 days of the trial and deliberations. He became very concerned about her health after the verdict. He says he'll go join her if the courts or the press release her name. This is a grim reminder that even in the 21st century, for all our knowledge and advancement, we still have one foot in the dark ages. It's scary to think how easy it is that a situation like this, where there just isn't any hard evidence of someone's guilt, can easily lead to a witch hunt or lynch mob. But this is exactly why we need to abide by the rules of evidence. Imagine what it was like to be on a jury, feeling the same thing that everyone watching the news at home felt. Sympathy for Kaylee, outrage and hatred at her mother. The easy way out, the cowardly way, would have been to cave to those emotions. The hard thing, the very difficult but very important thing, is to adhere to the principles of liberty and justice when it breaks your heart to do so. And that's why all 12 members of the Casey Anthony jury are true American heroes. Now let's take a swipe at the news of the bogus. In the United States, 1 out of every 31 adults are in prison or on parole. That's the largest of any population on Earth, even bigger than China and the Soviet Union during the height of communism, even greater than both of those put together. And this is at a time when violent crimes are dropping. According to the Department of Justice, violent crime and property crime dropped over 22% over the last decade. Shouldn't that mean 22% fewer people in prison? Well, no, because most of them are in prison for nonviolent, consensual, victimless crimes. So we can clearly see that some of the things the government considers crimes are selling drugs, gambling, and growing vegetables in your front lawn. Yes, you heard that last part right. A woman in Oak Park, Michigan faces 93 days in jail for planting a garden in her front lawn. State and federal requirements for standardized testing are there to make sure that today's young people grow up with the skills they need to take standardized tests. How well does it work? Well, throughout Atlanta, 178 different teachers and principals have been shown to have cheated on these tests to raise student scores. It seems that police all over the country must be in some kind of contest to see who can outdo the rest at being ridiculously unjust and heavy-handed. In Madison County, Mississippi, deputies responded to a report of an attack on Daughtry Drive. When they were driving on the road, they saw a party going on. The deputies just assumed that must be the place. No one had complained about the party. No neighbors complained about the noise. There was music, but the deputies even admitted the music wasn't loud. Nonetheless, the officers immediately started handcuffing people and even tasering them. Osama bin Laden was located using proven means of intelligence gathering which have nothing to do with waterboarding or any of the other ridiculous and unlawful things our government used ostensibly to find him. One of those has got to be the most idiotic thing our government has ever done. They went to a town in Pakistan and ran a fake vaccination drive, which was really an attempt to gather DNA evidence from everyone there. What, are you people stupid? Don't we have enough to deal with from the anti-vaccine conspiracy crazies without you idiot bureaucrats giving them even more reason to intimidate people into not getting vaccinated? Last week, we talked about how DNA evidence isn't perfect and can actually lead to false convictions. That point has been driven home in Las Vegas, where Dwayne Jackson, convicted on DNA evidence, who served 4 years in prison, is now known to have been convicted wrongfully. Turns out the DNA wasn't his, it was his cousin's. And now it's time to violate the jurisdiction of this week's biggest bogon emitter. 4 senators have called upon the Justice Department to investigate News Corporation, the parent company of Fox News, on charges of hacking cell phones and bribing public officials. What's wrong with that? Get this. The alleged crimes didn't even happen in the U.S. They happened in the UK, with reporters working for News of the World, a news outlet owned by News Corporation. Crimes that take place in other countries must be investigated and prosecuted by officials in that other country. Our government does not get to charge them with anything just because their parent company is in the U.S. And they have the audacity to charge News Corporation with breach of ethics? How about breach of justice, breach of proper jurisdiction, breach of due process? Now it's time to go agog at the ghastliness of this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! Yes, it's more idiocy relating to the Casey Anthony verdict. This time, it's from Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who blathered on about how the verdict means that terror suspects should not be tried in court. Here's what he said, quote, "These are not American citizens. We just found with the Casey Anthony case how difficult it is to get a conviction in a U.S. court. They should not be in U.S. courts and before military commissions." Sorry, but as we saw last week, the Casey Anthony case is an example of the system working. Against the popular opinion, against faulty human emotion, and against mob mentality, the jury very properly determined that there just wasn't enough evidence to convict beyond all reasonable doubt. That's what's supposed to happen. If McConnell doesn't like that, it's only because he doesn't like the rules of evidence, and he wants an excuse to avoid having to actually prove that these terror suspects did anything wrong.